having said that, I love winter, so I'm like, I just want to have some snow so I can go snowboarding. I haven't been snowboarding this season yet, so I wanted to stay around a little bit longer. Hey, my name's Richard. If you're joining us for the first time, it's a great joy to have you here with us as our guest, and we certainly hope that you can stick around a little bit afterwards and we can get to know you a bit more in our coffee bar. And if you're with us as per normal, welcome. Good to see you guys. We're finishing off our 3-part series called Resolve. I've got to share a great testimony with you. We're not even end of January and I've already hit my goal weight. And I want to share with you the secret. 3 simple steps of how to get to your goal weight. You want to know that? 3 weeks it took me to get my goal weight. Number 1 is fast for a week. Number 2, catch a really bad cold that dries up your appetite for the 2nd week. Recover from that said cold. And number 3, get a stomach bug and you can't eat. That's how you do it. Simple. And so you too can enjoy your best weight ever this year. So I'm here. It's awesome to be here. It's awesome to be able to start eating some food again. And we've been kicking off the year with this series called Resolve. And so we've been talking about how January, whatever your practice is, if you do New Year's resolutions or goal setting, or if you're so cynical with that, you don't, whatever that is, what is important moving ahead in life is to be resolved about certain things that are important. And we've seen that resolve just simply means to be firmly determined to do something, or firmly determined about something. And if you ever want to see any kind of change in your life, if you ever want to see some kind of transformation in your life, or in a relationship, or wherever it might be, in budgeting, finances, health, those kind of things, it's going to need resolve. And we looked and said it's no different when we talk about our faith, when we talk about not just individually our walk with the Lord, but collectively as a church. And we've outlined 3 things that really overlap, that we really want to be resolved more than ever in 2018. And we looked in the first week that we want to be resolved to put God first, not sticking him at the top of a priority list, but put him first by making him central to all of our lives, that his voice, his word is the ultimate authority in every aspect of our lives. Nothing's off limit for him to speak and shape our lives. The second thing we looked at, and this was last week, was life together, not to be confused with live together. That's a totally different series. But life together, that we're not made to live life alone. We're made in a God of relationship, made in a God of community, and therefore we need relationship and community. We even went so far as to say there is a human-shaped void in each and every one of our lives that God simply will not fill. And so it's important that we intentionally look at how that works out in our practical day-to-day living, that we do life together. And then today, as you see on the screen, we're going to be looking at living purposefully. That whatever we're doing in our day-to-day, whatever we're doing with life, that we should have a sense, a deep sense that it's purposeful, it's meaningful, it's not just pointless. And so it begs the question, though, should life be purposeful at all? You know, it's an assumption to say living purposefully. It assumes that there is purpose and meaning in the universe and in our existence. And so we want to just open it up today. And when I was kind of looking through this, I came across a reporter who a couple of years ago went about and asked atheists how they find meaning in a purposeless universe. If you're a purist as an atheist, there is no purpose, there is no meaning in the universe. We're just a random collection, and so they had pages of these atheists. It was kind of heavy working through their quotes and just seeing their worldview, seeing how they make sense of life, and then how they infuse meaning and purpose into a purposeless existence. So I want to draw out a couple of them this morning. The first one is from Susan Blackmore, a psychologist. He said, the pointlessness of life, it's not a thing to be overcome. It's something to be celebrated now, because that's all there is. Another guy, Alon Shahai, is a physics teacher and the author of The Young Atheist's Handbook. His is a bit of a longer quote, it's not there, but if you listen in, it says, yes, of course I know that life is ultimately without meaning or purpose. But the trick is not to wake up every morning and feel that way. Cognitive dissonance, embrace it. Create a sense of meaning and purpose by doing something useful with your life. And so I think it represents probably the very small minority of the human population, but nonetheless there are people who that is the meta-narrative, the big story of life, that there is no real point of life, there is no real meaning. And so if you want meaning and purpose, you kind of got to create it. Do something that makes you happy, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't count for much. And I'm glad that the majority of humans don't subscribe to that narrative, because I think it's a very bleak narrative, and certainly not the way I think life is meant to be lived. I think most of us, whether you would confess a belief in God or you're not even sure that kind of God, most of us have a sense that we're made for something more. That we're made for something more. There's a deep quest for purpose and meaning in most people's lives. I think you have to work harder to suppress what bubbles up, that there is meaning and purpose in life, like some of those atheists. I think you have to work harder to silence those voices and make the voice of meaningless and purposeless loud in your lives. I think the quest for purpose occupies most people's attention at some stage. Even in small things, even in small ways. And if I spoke to you in the coffee bar afterwards and I said, "Hey, do you want to get together tomorrow at 2:00?" You probably should say, or at least you might be thinking, "Sure, what's the point of us getting together? What's the purpose? What's the meaning for us to get together?" And I say, well, absolutely no meaning whatsoever. Pure pointlessness. Pure and utter purposelessness. So 2:00, good? And it'd be kind of like, so even in little things like that, no, my time is precious, and I don't want to commit time to pointlessness and meaningless and so trivial, but pay attention to that. So we look for purpose even in some small, indiscriminate ways. For some of you, I know a lot of you are young in this church, and so this might have blown past you, but 2001, 2002, a guy called Rick Warren, who's a pastor in the United States, he wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. And it was a 40-day kind of Bible study, if you will. It's unashamedly a Christian book. He, I think, quotes over 1,000 scriptures there. I mean, it really is. It's like if you walk into a bookstore, it would kind of be in the little, hidden away Christian section. And he wrote this book about this very thing, that we're created for purpose. And it is now one of the bestsellers of all time of nonfiction. I think up till date, it's sold over 60 million copies. Second to the Bible, it's the book that's been translated the most into different languages. It's found its way into the hands of presidents, cabinets, CEOs, business folk, people of high prominence, ordinary, everyday people, mums, dads, college students. It's found its way, and I think one of the things why is because it resonates so much with this quest for purpose. Even sports stars, even highly accomplished sports stars have gotten a hold of this book, and it's revolutionized and rattled their world. One such guy, I came across an interview with ESPN, a guy called Michael Phelps, who's done pretty okay. This was from August 2016. So this is, I don't know if he had been retired then, but he was coming close to the end of his career, and his career it's unprecedented. It'd be a long time, I think, until we see another Michael Phelps. So you'd think someone like that, such achievement in life, wouldn't really battle with a sense of meaning. But this is what he had to say. Someone gave him, a good friend of his gave him, when he was in a real dark spot. And if you've been tracking with Michael Phelps, you know he went through some kind of weird stuff, got arrested, DUIs, that kind of thing. And this is his quote from that interview. It says about this book, "It's turned me into believing there is a power greater than myself, and there is a purpose for me on this planet." And I thought that was fascinating. From a guy who so many people would say, wow, to be in his shoes, to have that accomplishment, to have that sort of success before you're 30 or whatever age he is. And yet, his heart, his quest is still going on. Is there purpose? And perhaps is there purpose beyond just being a swimmer, which is, I think, a struggle for a lot of athletes, right? Because their identity is so wrapped up in what they do, and there's a real a time ticking on what they can do before their body gives out. And if your identity is wrapped up in that, what happens when you no longer can play football or hockey or swim like you used to, and leads to a lot of them an identity crisis. So there's not just a quest for purpose, there seems to be a real burden for purpose. And I think even just chatting with some of you here, really sometimes a struggle, what should I be doing with my life? Maybe there's different options. Maybe you're graduating and there's a real burden on you. Which path should I be taking? Am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Should I stay in Toronto? Should I leave? And that kind of thing. And so oftentimes we think of purpose in those kind of ways. We want to know what God wants us to do, and we want to know it right now. We want to know it very clearly. And so make no mistake, I think we believe in a God, and I think Scripture testifies to a God who's intimately and intricately involved in your life. That He cares, not just about the big stuff, but the small stuff. And so let's settle that He does care, that there is a path that He would have us walk on. But I think sometimes we think that it's very narrow. And we're going to tap into a little bit today. I think a better question, not to say that question of where should I be or what should I be doing, not to say that those are insignificant, but I think they sometimes take too great a significance. They're very circumstantially dependent, right? They're very dependent on circumstances lining up. That what should I be doing is very dependent on a job maybe that's in front of me, or a course of study that I can walk into. And I think sometimes we empower circumstances too much in the quest for purpose. And your purpose trumps circumstance. It doesn't need the stars to align for you to fulfill your purpose. I think a better question to ask is, who am I meant to be? Who am I meant to be? What did God have in mind when He made me? 7.5 billion people breathing on this planet right now. And not one of those 7.5 billion people is quite like you. And that says something. It says that you're not to copy other people's paths. It says that you're unique, just like everyone else, which is I always find funny. It's like, hey, you're so unique, just like 7.5 billion other people. But you really are. And I think a question like that, again, makes our being greater than our doing. Not to say that our doing isn't important, but your doing should flow from a deep sense and settledness of whom I'm meant to be. And that's where I want to go a little bit today. When we talk about purpose, living purposefully, I'm not sure what your expectations are. If you're hoping that, just like I gave you the 3-step to your best weight ever, here are the 5 steps for you totally finding out what exactly you should be doing tomorrow morning. And if you're not doing it, you can course correct. I'm going to disappoint you in that, but I think I am going to help you, hopefully, largely, get you in touch with very clearly who you're meant to be and how that then can be lived out in whatever way that you find yourself today. Let's define purpose quickly. Purpose, really, it's the reason for which something is done or created, or the reason for which something exists. And so if we're looking at that definition, one of the best places for us to start, certainly from a Christian metanarrative point of view, in terms of that the Bible, the Christianity tells another story. Everyone's telling a story. Everyone has a narrative. You are living according to a narrative. That narrative might say you need to work hard at school to get a good job, because your good job gets you a good job, and a good grades gets you a good job, and a good job provides you security and significance in life. And that might be the narrative that you've been told from a young age. Maybe you're the first person in your family to go to college or university. And that narrative is strong, and that's what you're living to. And so all your values, all your decisions will be shaped by that narrative. For some of us, the meta-narrative is that life is to be enjoyed. Live now, live in the moment. You only have one life. Live it to the full. And so the meta-narrative that you're living at is that. For many people, the sense of purpose is freedom. What's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is to be free. To be free, to be fully who I am, and to do whatever I want. Another guy who wrote on purpose, and his book also did exceedingly well, is a guy called Viktor Frankl. And he's a psychoanalyst, a psychologist, who survived the prison camps of Auschwitz in the Second World War. He went on to write a book about how he survived that, and what he, as a psychologist, began to observe amongst his peers, that those who survived had certain traits, and a lot of it had a tie to a greater purpose. If they could find something to live for, they could endure some of the most harshest of treatments, and even face death itself. This is what he had to say about freedom in his book, his bestseller, Man's Search for Meaning. Freedom, however, is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating to mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. And so it's kind of one of those quotes that you probably need to read over and over again and kind of get into that. But if you haven't had your second cup of coffee, I apologize. It's like, there's just a lot of words on the screen right now. And so if that's you, okay. But for a lot of us, the meta-narrative, or what is the narrative? What is the meta-narrative for Toronto? That Toronto is a city where if you work hard, you can achieve your dreams. Now, it's not to say that some of those narratives aren't bad, but you've got to be careful at what you're subscribing to, what meta-narrative you are living out right now. And the Christian story is one such meta-narrative. It tells us, I think, a very compelling, a very rational, a very holistic way in which to live life. And so Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, I believe God gives us a power-packed 2 or 3 verses that infuse not just creation, but infuse humanity with purpose. And we're going to dial into that today. So Genesis chapter 1, 26 to 28. It says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Verse 28, And God blessed them. God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. You know, when God is speaking to the first humans, they're standing proxy for all humanity. You know, we see that a couple of chapters later. Unfortunately, out of their failure to live up to something, we kind of suffer with the results of that. So when God's speaking to them, it's not just directly to them. He's speaking and infusing into humanity, all that would follow after them, with this sense of purpose. This is why you've created. This is why you've been created. Now, some people, some Christians, believe in a story that goes like this. God created a good world, and he put mankind into this world, and he asked mankind to live up to a moral code. Of course, mankind couldn't do that. They failed to live up to the moral code. It got God really angry. He had to judge their disobedience, their sin. But fortunately, at the last minute, Jesus, his son, steps in, takes the punishment for mankind, and now our purpose is to believe in Jesus and to look forward to heaven one day and escape this world. In a nutshell. It's a little bit more nuanced there, but even maybe for some of us in this room, that's the predominant narrative story we've been told. It's not to say that some of that isn't true, but it is to say a lot of that is not the full truth. And I want to unpack for you a little bit of a holistic narrative that will help you and I figure out, what does it mean to live purposefully then? And it goes more or less like this, that we are made in the image of God. We image God in this world primarily through relationship and representation. You know, we're made in the image of God, and we image God in this world through relationship. Firstly, with God. We looked at, so we come full circle. It's back to week 1. God first. You know, it's back to that. There is a God-shaped vacuum in our lives. That there is a place that we've been designed in our lives to have God central. And gosh, do we try to fill it with other stuff. But other stuff doesn't quite seem to fit into that uniquely designed place in our lives that's really ultimately occupied for God. Why? is because we're created in the image of this God. We're created to be in relationship with Him. I mean, ding, 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 right there. Your purpose, you're one step closer to your purpose if you're in relationship with God. That you're drawing on that relationship with God as a very central part of your life. But not just with God. We discovered last week that it's with God and with others. That we're created not just to have relationship with God, but to have relationship one with each other. And then thirdly, to have relationship with God's creation. It's like God creates this world just for us. And then secondly, representation. He then says, I want you, you're like me. So it tells us, we just read that, it tells us we're made in the likeness of God. You know, some people have kind of forgotten that we're in the likeness of God and they just go, we are God. No, there's a big difference. Words matter. We're made in the likeness of God. We're not the substance. We're not God. But we're very close and made and very similar to Him. It's kind of like, you know, if you meet someone and there's their kids, if you get to know the parents and you get to know the kids, you can begin to see, wow, I can really see you in your child. I can really see this trait in your child, but it's like us. There's certain likenesses that we have in us that remind us that we're made not just from some random evolutionary process, but from an intelligent designer who thought about you in 21st century Toronto and put you together uniquely such that there's no one quite like you with 7.5 other billion people on this planet. And one of the ways we're in His likeness is in the way that we're to exert power in a good way over His creation. Responsibility, stewardship. And if we did that well, it would cause human flourishing and the creation to be fruitful. And this is the world that God created. You know, sometimes when we think of the world that God created, we think it was perfect. It was perfect in the sense that there was no sin at that stage. There was no disharmony. But it doesn't mean it was unfinished. It wasn't perfect in the sense that everything had been done. God had created some amazing raw materials and then sticks the pinnacle of His creation in you and me. And He says, now I want you to go and I want you to be like me in this world and create and bring order and name stuff and build stuff and have families and enjoy one another. And as you do that, you bring glory to me and then you image me well to this world. You show what this world it's like to have good governance, beauty. And so if you're sitting here today and say, well, that really isn't a purpose that I subscribe to because I don't really believe in God. But I would say consider how instinctive it is for us to appreciate beauty in our lives. Consider how instinctive it is to build relationship or want to seek community, even if it's dysfunctional. Oftentimes I think of gang culture, like how dysfunctional that is. But once again, isn't gang culture just another reminder we don't want to do life alone, that we're craving for acceptance. We're craving for places to be able to be affirmed in our identity. Think of the instinctiveness that you long for justice, to be productive and fruitful in life. You don't want to get together for a purposeless 2 p.m. appointment on a Monday afternoon. You want to get together for some meaning, for some purpose. And those all point, as N.T. Wright says, they all point to the echoes of a voice. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. I think you have to work hard to say, well, that's just really some random pointlessness, but I'm glad it's there, but it really doesn't point to much more. I think you have to work hard to, really fulfill that metanarrative with your life. So we're made in this image, this God. And so the tragedy of that is that we didn't fulfill our role. We abdicated our responsibility. Instead of leaning on and drawing from the image of the Creator, we began to look within creation to get our image from. We began to take orders from that which was in creation. We began to draw from the images within creation, and the Bible calls that idolatry. It calls it misdirected worship. We're created to worship God, but in the absence of God, our worship has to go somewhere else. And so instead of the Creator, it goes to creation. And you can name your idolatry, you can name your idols, but just think of some of the main popular ones, and even in the 21st century, money, sex, and power. And so what we do is we give power to these idols, and these idols in turn enslave us and bring about a corruption into this good world that God created. We no longer have the freedom to be able to glorify God. We're no longer in the position to be able to exert good governance and stewardship over His creation, because it's being corrupted through our misdirected worship. And so instead of bringing glory to God, we glorify other things, ultimately even ourselves. And so these idols gain power through our worship of them. And idols do what any God would do, is they begin to shape an identity for us and enslave us to that. And so Jesus comes into the scene. And so again, we've been told the story. We've been told a narrative. It's not untrue, but it's certainly not the whole of it, that Jesus comes in to forgive us of our sins, because God's mad. And so Jesus dies a cruel death on the cross, so that you and I get the greatest monopoly, get out of jail free card ever in the game of life. And that if we just hold on to that get out of hell card, then we're good to go when we finally meet Him on the day we breathe our last breath. I mean, honestly, that is the narrative some Christians begin to say, what a sad narrative to live by, because it's not the biblical narrative. Yes, Jesus does purchase our forgiveness. Yes, we do. We are not right with God. So Jesus puts us right with God. But you see, sin is more than us just breaking some moral code. Sin is that we abdicated. We missed the mark of what it truly meant to be human. We missed the mark of being an image maker. And so we're an image breaker. We missed that mark. And through that, we see suffering and ultimately death come into God's good creation. So Jesus comes in not just to purchase our forgiveness from that, but He destroys the power of that sin to corrupt us. And Jesus now makes a way for us to be truly human again, to be truly remade and restored into the image making that you and I were created to do and to be. And so Jesus brings about an amazing restoration. And Colossians 1:19-20 is just one of many verses we could have looked at, but this is the one I want to draw. And it says, "For in Jesus all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things," reconciling all things to Himself, restoring it back to its original purpose, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross. So Jesus enables damaged, broken, and hurting people like you and me to be flourishing human beings again. You know, when we're enslaved to our sin, we're less human. And so Jesus comes, a lot of people think, well, it's humanity, it's my humanness that's the problem. No, it isn't. I mean, Jesus came as a human. I mean, if He endorsed humanity as a good thing, I mean, that's the greatest way to endorse it. He didn't come as some quasi-God or some kind of ghost-like thing. He came as a human. I mean, He had flesh. He grew up. He went through adolescence. He got a job. I mean, we forget these things. He felt human emotion. He knew what He cried. He laughed. He got angry. All of that. The one difference was that He did that from a sinless perspective, highlighting our problem is not our humanness. It's that we abdicated our role way back when, and that sin corrupts us. That sin makes us less human. That sin makes us wander around and ask questions. What's the purpose of my existence? What's the meaning of my life? Jesus comes to restore that. He births a new creation, and He's begun a restoring of the creation, and one day will come again to fulfill that, and that we will enter in, not playing harps on some cloud in heaven, but that God recreates a new heaven and a new earth, and that you and I are able to enter, and He restores His original plan. See, God's plan is moving ahead. Sometimes we forget that, and sometimes it's hard to remember that God's in control, right? But God's plan is moving ahead. History is moving towards the fulfillment of God's purpose and plan, and He invites you and I into that. And it's not just to have forgiveness from sins and hold on till we go to heaven. It's to join Him in what He's doing right here, right now, starting with you and I, making us new again. You say, this is awesome, Rich. I didn't realize I was signing up for a Philosophy 101 class on a Sunday morning. I'm a very practical person. Just tell me, how does this work out in my life? How does this tell me what job I should take, where I should live? So I'm not going to tell you what job you should take, where you should live, because I believe you're designed to be in a relationship with a God who can tell you that, who can lead you in that, in a community that can help you discern that. But what I can help you with today is that, what does this have to do with anything about purpose? It has everything to do. If you don't realize the purpose of being human is, then it doesn't matter what job you take, or where you live, or which friends you take. But you understand the blueprint for being human. Why are you human? It's to be an image bearer. Here's how I think you should begin to ask different questions. Begin to ask, how do I reflect or represent God's likeness where I am right now? As a student, in your dorm, in your workplace, on your street, in your condo building. Where you are right now. Where you are right now. Secondly, in what I'm doing right now. When we tap into the purpose of being human, it gives dignity and purpose to almost any path in life. One of the big things it does is it gives tremendous purpose to the ordinary, everyday things of life. I think the other challenge for us when we ask the question of purpose, we live in an age of instant celebrity. We live in an age of, these amazing stories of startups and these guys who by the time they're 30, these men and the women, by the time they're 30, they're multimillionaires and have created a thing that's disrupted industries. And we think, like, if my life is going to have purpose, it's got to be big and bold and I've got to change the world. Now, there's ways to change the world, but it doesn't have to be with a massive platform. And you can change the world. You can change the world and never be written in the history books. And so sometimes there's that pressure that I'm not really doing anything with my life. My life is boring. I look after kids all day, or that whatever it is. And so again, you're selling yourself short of what it means to be an image bearer. That we bring, it's like an angled mirror. That we bring glory to God as we reflect His likeness into this world. And that we then, as we reflect His likeness into this world, we give God glory in this world. And then third thing is, how do I reflect or represent God's likeness? Who I'm with. And working with a lot of young people over the years, it's always a big question. It's a great question, the question of purpose. What am I supposed to do with my life? And it's often around the what. It's what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to go? But I really want to subscribe to you. Another important question, I think maybe more important question, is a who question. Who are you supposed to do life with? Who are you supposed to walk with? Who has God put in your life? Again, if we're image bearers and relationship is such a key part of it, then your purpose really is going to spill out of relationships. For me, that's why spiritual family and church, it's such a key part of you discovering your purpose. I would not be here today if I didn't have a spiritual family in which purpose was cultivated in me. 5-6 years ago when I was sitting in Cape Town, South Africa, and the reason I bring this up is whenever someone gets introduced to me and, is that Australian? I was like, Australian. If you're Australian, we love you, but Australians and South Africans generally, we have this thing. It's all around sport, okay, so it's not too, but still. They have a really terrible accent. Australian, eh? G'day. It's like, oh. Anyways, so again, if you're Australian, we do love you. But more importantly, God loves you. And so people ask, South Africa, where about Cape Town? Oh, Cape Town, God, I want to go to Cape Town. And they think in the picture books, Table Mountain, all that kind of thing. And then there's a kind of quizzical look in their face. Why on earth would you come to Canada from such a warm place? It happens a lot in the winter, particularly these kind of questions. And so as I unpack my story, part of my story is, I didn't just come here for a better life. I'd say that's not a bad thing if you want to have a better life for your family. I think that's far better than wanting to have a bad life for your family. Okay, that's the alternative. But I think God's purpose is bigger than that, and so part of my purpose was unpacked through family, through spiritual family. I got into a Skype call with a gentleman by the name of Bert Thompson. I don't know if you know Bert and I, but we're the most unlikely friendship ever, right? We're just different generations, we're just on 2 different continents, there's like everything, like how does that get together? But part of that is through spiritual family, and part of that spiritual family then got us a connection, the who. Right? The who, not just God, not that I'm hearing God in Cape Town, I'm feeling like there's a shift and a change, but I'm really not sure what to do. Here comes this dimension, God brings this dimension in, and as we begin to chat and we begin to talk, we begin to find, wow, there's a real common vision of a way forward. We can really walk together in a way forward and dream of a church we'd love to be part of starting. Dream of something that God's put in His heart, my heart, and seen that come into fruition. And so that brings me here. And so we get on the plane. And I wouldn't never have gotten on a plane unless I had a sense of purpose with that. But was it all like down pat? Was it all clear on my mind? No, but I walk it out with relationship. I walk it out in relationship with God, with my family, and then the broader community of trusted voices in my life. And I'm sad if you don't have that. But I'm glad that part of us following our call, the call, is that we're creating a community in which you can be a part of that now. And that you don't have to figure out life all by yourself. And you don't have to have all the answers. And sometimes it might be like, gosh, I don't even know. But we're in this together. You don't need to figure it all out yourself. And so I want to leave you with that. I want to leave you with a sense that God's purpose for you as a human being can be explored in so many different career paths in so many different ways, and God does have some key things, but you then begin to marry that with some very practical things of which I'm not. We've spoken a lot on. I referenced Bert's message, "Fulfill Your Calling," it was a couple of years ago. Go Google that on our website. Some tremendously practical messages we've had on figuring out the practical side. But you begin to marry. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? Because sometimes we're passionate about things we're just really not that good at. And then how do you monetize that, right? Bills are going to be paid, and you begin to get into all that stuff. But for me, the burden for me here today is we get very pragmatic at the expense of not really deeply engaged with why are you human? What being a human means you're infused with purpose. Yes, it's been fractured through our sin, through our abdicating that, but the good news of what Jesus comes is not that we get forgiveness from sin and He appeases an angry Father, but that God comes to restore us back to the purpose with which He made us. That you don't need to live our life purposeless, meaningless. That you can take the 2 p.m. coffee with me, right? And be infused with purpose. Why? We're just going to get together and build relationship. I'm not, look, I'm an introvert. I do not need you to take up a 2 p.m. coffee with me. But if you would like to, come and speak to me. And so it gets unpacked. So full circle. Maybe Natalie, if you can put up that first diagram of the 3 circles intersecting. So how are you going to discover your purpose? You're going to discover your purpose by coming into the middle of that. So your purpose is to be in a life-giving relationship with God. Some of you say I'm Christian, but you're Christian, but your relationship with God is kind of a part of your life. Well, then you're only going to be a part human, in a sense, or fully human. Make Him central to all of your life. The second thing is that you're going to be thrust into community with people who are trying to figure out as well, who love God. And then you're going to begin to be able to step and walk into life purposefully. Whatever it is, mundane things, ordinary things, or extraordinary things. I do believe some of you are made to do extraordinary things on a public stage far beyond what we could imagine and dream. But don't be confused to think that's the only way God can use someone. That purpose is found on having a platform and a stage. Jesus never had an Instagram account, never had Twitter, didn't even know, he probably knew what Siri was in his omnipresent, but you know what I mean? It's like, how do these guys do it? Never traveled far. Was pretty mediocre in the sense of success by the time he had finished his short 3 years of public ministry. Kind of had a band full of followers. And yet, here we are. You and me, a result of that. So let's pray. I want to pray for you. I want to pray that you've been infused with purpose. We're going to back it down and sing a song, we're going to close, and then we're going to have some coffee together.